Hey everyone, this is RayRob, where I'm Ray.
And I'm Rob, and we want to welcome you to a brand new episode of Say Hello to My Little Film.
Hey there, it'll be just a little while till Ray and Rob spit their spittle. Come on, check out of the hospital. So grab some of your best peanut brittle. This will be a darn good transmittal. And say hello to my little film.
That's right, everyone. We are back with a brand new episode of Say Hello to My Little Film. But before we kick things off, Ray, you got to tell everybody what it is we do here.
Yes, sir. On Say Hello to My Little Film, since this is my turn, I am introducing you a movie that you have never seen before, that I love, and I'm going to try to get you to love it as much as I do.
That's right. We call that our fresh perspective on a retrospective review. And as you said, Ray, it is your week, and I'm very curious to what you're going to bring, because I think you told me you got something new.
Yeah, it was type of movie we have not done
Okay,
yet
type of movie. Okay.
on this podcast, on this brand.
Yeah.
I'm going to introduce to you an animated movie.
Really?
So we've not done that yet.
No, like you said, we did that on a copy of a copy.
Yes.
But we have not done that on Say Hello to My Little Film. That's very intriguing.
Yeah, so I'm very excited about that. I will also say, I'm going to preface it, we do call this, as you said, our fresh perspective on a retrospective review. And this movie is not that old. It's only 4 years old.
Oh.
About 5 years, going on 5 years old. So it's
about going to kindergarten.
Yeah. But, the day of the media day we live in, that's like 100 years in dollar years nowadays. So, but yeah, so the movie's not that old. I've been waiting on this. I've been sitting on this one. I've wanted to show you this one, but I've wanted it to ripen. I wanted this to get a little bit older, and I can't wait any longer.
Okay, well, fair enough. Well, as you said, it's something new, which I am very excited about. But before we go, Ray, I got to know, what do you got?
What do you got? What do you got? What do you got?
All right, Rob. What I got is, hold on. I'm gonna make you wait just a hair longer.
What?
I wanted to add in just so you know. I want to make sure you have all the information. I'm gonna introduce to you a movie that it's the third movie in a trilogy, and you might not have seen the first two. I haven't.
What? Am I going to be like a child who walks into a movie?
Yes. And just ruins it. No. Yeah.
V.I. Lenin, Raymond. Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov.
This is what's great about animated movies is they can be a little more standalone. And so I feel like this movie falls in that category. You don't really have to watch the first two. If anything that you need to know, like backstory-wise, they're going to inform you. And so this third movie in the trilogy that you need to check out, that I'm going to make you check out, is Puss in Boots, The Last Wish.
You're going to piss in boots?
We're going to have so much fun watching this movie.
We're going to piss in our boots.
Yeah, I want you to check this one out.
Yeah.
It's you never got to it.
No, I never did. So full disclosure, obviously I know what this movie is. You have to be living under a rock not to know that. But I do know it was received well.
Yes,
it was reviewed very well. I think it was even nominated for Best Animated Feature. But I like you said, I didn't watch the first two, and I really didn't care to go back and watch the first two.
Yeah.
And so I kind of avoided it because of that.
Yeah, and luckily for me, I got some info from some friends that said like this was a great animated movie, maybe the best animated movie since Into the Spider-Verse, which we love.
We do.
And that you didn't need to have a whole lot of background knowledge. You know the SHREK world. You know who Puss in Boots is a character. You know what SHREK world is with all these like fable characters and stuff being in there and stuff. So I said that's all you need to know. You can go and watch it, and you're gonna have a blast. And I did.
Well, that's awesome and I remember hearing some stuff that they did some interesting things animated, like with the animation, kind of like you mentioned Spider-Verse, so maybe something along
they
those
do
lines.
have some of that. They're able to kind of jump between different animation styles in this movie. There's some that look very traditional, like the 3D, kind of art, and then there's some that's like sped up frame rates, really kind of like almost like a color paint, like color art, watercolors, I should say, kind of like during the battle sequences, like I said, messing with frame rates and stuff. So yeah, they do. It's kind of that trend after like Into the Spider-Verse. There was there was like the Ninja Turtles movies where they really were messing around with animation. But, not just that though. The movie's got a great little plot. Basically, Antonio Banderas plays Puss, and Puss, he's a cat. He's got 9 lives, and he's kind of realized he's lived 8 of them.
Oh boy!
So he is running out of time.
Die.
Yeah, big time. he's running out of time, and so he's got to kind of use this wish. He's got to find this like wish that can get him his his last wish of
Wish for more wishes.
wishing for more lives. Yeah, wishing for more lives, and it's really cool. So there's some other good things. There's a great villain in this movie, basically kind of like death.
I think a lot of these movies, that is what's missing from them is great villains. So that's actually really awesome to hear.
Yeah, there's it's kind of like it can play into some Western themes, with like the Zorro-ness of Puss in Boots, and the villain comes around with a whistle, and it's kind of one of those creepy little whistles, and it kind of reminds me of like Once Upon a Time in the West kind of thing, where like you get that kind of that musical note to kind of lead you into a character and stuff. So that was super cool. And they got some great MacGuffins. Like there's this map that is taking Puss to the Wish, and whoever holds the map, like the route to get there reflects like their fears potentially and like their thoughts and stuff. So throughout the movie, many people grab the map, and then the world changes, and you get some really good insight on what these characters are like, maybe some of their struggles. The movie can do a lot of legwork for those characters with very little like exposition, because that map kind of reveals it all. So by the end of the movie, you get to see a lot of really good arcs that feel completed and stuff, and the movie just leaves you just feeling really nice.
Oh, well, okay. Well, like I said, I it wasn't even necessarily that I didn't want to watch it. It's just I didn't want to catch up. But knowing that I don't have to catch up makes me even more excited to watch this movie. And that's exactly what we are going to do right now. We are going to go watch Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. If you have not watched Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, by all means, pause the podcast. Go watch this movie and come back and find out if I love it as much as Ray does.
Ray and Rob are currently watching the film. You may be also watching the film. If you're not, then you're listening to me say that Ray and Rob are watching the film. They'll be right back when they're done watching the film.
All right, guys, me and Rob are back from watching Puss in Boots: Last Wish. Rob, I told you this was the third of a trilogy. Didn't have to watch the first two. Was I a truth teller there? Do you agree with me?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that I'm sure there were elements of the character relationships that maybe I would have gotten from previous installments, but I don't even know, because I don't know which ones weren't and which ones were in previous installments. But I imagine like Kitty Softpaws, that strikes me as somebody.
She was in the first one.
But that's really the only one, and I think they did a good job of explaining why there would be friction between the two of them.
Yeah.
Kind of like the whole wedding scenario, and that, like, really, once you got that was really all you needed.
Right.
Even if there were other details of their relationship that you didn't see how they met or whatever, none of that really mattered for this particular movie. So.
Yeah, once somebody's like, oh, they were going to get married, you can imply how close they were together and stuff. How strong their relationship must have been for it to have gotten that far.
Definitely.
So you're not missing out. You're not missing out on the stuff. Whatever their relationship is at in this moment is all that matters, and you can fill in the backstory yourself.
And even really the other, like I said, even the other characters, like Goldie and the Three Bears and Jack Horner, you can imagine that there could be references to them in the first two movies, but it's also doesn't necessarily matter. Goldie and the Bears and Puss are all they're thieves. Yeah. And Jack Horner is some kind of offense.
Right.
So because of that, it's like, okay, well, obviously they're on each other's radar. So you can imagine, again, why they would have beef with one another for what X, Y, and Z reason. So I think there wasn't any need to see anything previous to understand their dynamics in this movie either.
And I really do think, again, this movie is 10 years, I think, removed from the second one. So it's almost this franchise was done, and then this idea came about, and they're like, okay, we know we're going to have to catch the audience up on stuff, and we do want it to be standalone because it's been so long.
That's interesting. 10 years.
Yeah, I think probably this franchise was dead until probably Spider-Verse, kind of put some thoughts in people's head, because you can see they do mess around with the animation style here a little bit,
Yeah.
especially when they get into action scenes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. As far as like why such the big gap. I think modern animation, like you said, Spider-Verse specifically, but and there's other examples as well. But I do think that's kind of kicked the door down on what animation can be
Right.
in the modern world, and I think that has opened up all kinds of possibilities. So I could see a franchise like this that was dead. Stale,
Yeah.
exactly. Saying, you know what, we can revive it with this. Like
Right.
if we can put these flourishes. But even with that being said, I wouldn't say they overdid it. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it was little flourishes here and there, as opposed to maybe like a full-fledged reimagining, like a la Spider-Verse.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I really think it's just the action sequences. I think when they're not in action sequences, it's pretty this normalized, maybe some like kind of watercolorish style to their overall animation, but it's basically that 3D, 2D type of animation.
Yeah.
Kind of what you'd see in Shrek. And I kind of feel the same way, when I think back about like Shrek now, like, I think Shrek's like a great movie and super fun to watch, but like visually it is kind of just bland. It's just like of the time where it's just pretty static, and it's more about like that was just a really good visual, like just a feat in itself, just having this character on screen.
Yeah.
We didn't have to do anything extra visually, but nowadays we're jaded to that. Like that's boring now, so we need the extra level of engagement that Spider-Verse and Ninja Turtles and Puss in Boots that have all kind of jumped and taken next.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. When you think back to like Toy Story, like the first Toy Story, like there was barely any real texture mapping or anything like that. Like it felt very
which is why
smooth
they
and
could
sterile.
use plastic toys. It's a great medium.
But it worked at the time because again, as an audience being new to this kind of technology, I think it really kind of blew everybody's mind.
Yeah.
But you're right. Over the years, the more and more it's been done, even just by Pixar, with the sheer amount of movies they've put out over the last 30 years, they have to find new ways. And I think I even heard their new movie is going to have some kind of like switch in animation that they've never done before, to kind of like keep it not the
Rubber, is that their next one? Or?
No, the one that was just out with the wood, with like the beavers, like that. Not that one. There's another. I think there's
one after that.
Yeah, I think there's one about a French cat or something like that. So, but yeah, so I can appreciate right. I can appreciate with Puss in Boots about kind of a way to revitalize a franchise that definitely was stale.
Yeah, needed it obviously. Now, one thing that I kind of mentioned in the before section as well that I really kind of dig was just the villain. And when I was talking about the villain in the preview section, I was talking about Wolf, who's
I was gonna say there's so many you could choose from, so I didn't know if that's what you were talking about.
I was talking about Wolf. He has the whistle, which I'm such a big fan of Once Upon a Time in the West, and so it kind of has some drawback there to me with the whistle and stuff. But he's really, to me, like the catalyst of the movie too, because he's kind of sets Puss on this like I don't know, on this whole adventure. And then at some points I was even wondering, when you watch the movie, like, is he real?
I definitely wondered that. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right as far as like a weakness in need opponent for Puss, like because of the whole central arc of the story, like being on his last life and death being the finality for him, and just being the end of the legend, if you will. And having this wolf that's like constantly following him and just kind of popping up in these situations. I agree completely. I wasn't sure if he was really there, so it was great in the finale sequence when he comes into the Star Realm area and everybody's like, who is that? So you're like, whoa, you can see him too. It's like
that comes for us all,
right?
Which is, and it's kind of a, it's a kid's movie for sure. It's an animated movie, but like that's kind of heavy topic, and that's kind of, those are the kids movies we grew up on in the '80s, where weird stuff was happening that was not appropriate. And I like that this movie's like, he's afraid of dying, people, and that is what's on this. That's what this movie's about.
Well, there's a universality to it. It gets the adult in the seat too. You know what I mean? And I think that's always a great sign of a good animated film, even one that's considered to be a kid's film. If you can get the adult in the seat and appreciate it too, you've done good. And
absolutely.
I think Pixar does that pretty well. I think their batting average has fallen quite a bit since like those that first initial like 10 to movies, 15 years. But pretty much everything up to the last Dinosaur, and then like after that, Last Dinosaur on has been very hit or miss. But I think Puss in Boots does a good job of that, giving out or laying out these kind of universal themes that all audiences can kind of glom onto.
And what I think the movie does too, like we said, it's been a long time since the second movie. You have to reintroduce the character, and so that first action sequence and song is really good. It's highly kinetic and it's able to introduce you to like a lot of what Puss in Boots thinks his strengths are. Like he's afraid of nothing. He's never been touched by a blade.
Right.
Like he's
Yet
this
he's died
hero.
8 times.
Yeah.
Never been touched
Not
by
by
a blade,
Not
but
by
died
blade.
8 times.
They do show you all the ways that he's died.
Oh no.
But then in that one bar scene when Wolf first shows up, they crash all that down. They immediately he gets touched by a blade. You see fear and the hair on the back of his whole body stand up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I feel like they do such a good job of building him up really quickly just to remind you who this character is and then stripping it right away.
Yeah. I was a really big fan of the Sleeping Giant. Like that.
Yeah.
You're just obviously the song is great. It's a great way to open up the movie. Kind of like you said, has this kind of kinetic action sequence. But putting in this Sleeping Giant character, which I think you could tell right off the bat that the Sleeping Giant animation wise was different than anything they had done before.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great opening statement to kind of put you on the path of what you're getting ready to see.
Yeah. Didn't look like a Shrek movie.
No, not at all. And I think that was important. To kind of set that stage for, we are experimenting with different kind of animations, frame rates, things like that, and and it also set up the recurring joke of the Spanish splinter,
right?
Which I think is also effective.
It absolutely was. Yeah, and then once I feel like you do strip away those strengths of Puss in Boots, you get to kind of see like what the arcs are going to be of the movie, and one of the things I think is really interesting about like Puss in Boots as just like as a fictional cartoon character though is like this idea of like wastefulness. I feel like you can project on him where there's like he's lived this life that's been absolutely fun, like carefree, because he always knows he has 9 lives. He has like there's really no consequences to his life. And then as soon as there are consequences, as soon as it can really affect him, his whole demeanor changes, and now there's fear and the fear of losing everything. I think everybody can relate to the idea of like, when you have nothing to lose, sure, everything is fun and you can be carefree and stuff. But when there's really consequences and your decisions matter and how you treat people matter, you might not be the same person. And I think that's kind of where Puss finds himself in. And I think I like when he gets to kind of analyze himself and see like, is this new person weaker or better or nicer? Or like, what is this person who's got to actually be considerate to the people around him and how he interacts? What is this person like and do I like him? I just like those like deep thoughts that Puss is kind of forced into.
Well, yeah, and it's the deconstruction of a legend.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a big part of what this movie is this kind of, stripping away the veneer of what a legend is and the stories and everything else and kind of like what lies beneath.
Right.
And I completely agree. So much so that it kind of, I thought it was a really great scene where Puss actually buries his attire.
Yeah.
Because it's like he's burying the legend.
Yeah.
But he's still, he's still there. But like this is what makes him Puss in Boots.
Right.
So when this stuff is gone, even though it feels kind of like, well, this isn't obviously a real grave or whatever.
Yeah,
it's just like he's just burying his stuff. But it is a real grave, right? Yeah. From a symbolic standpoint, it absolutely is. And then he kind of goes into quote unquote retirement, if you will, to just try to be a regular cat.
Yeah.
With Mama Luna and her
which he quickly falls into.
Right. And he goes by the name Pickles,
yeah.
which is just hilarious.
I guess I also see it too, like, I guess that metaphor that I'm looking at it too, or was trying to explain a second ago, it's almost like I can feel like going into an adulthood a little bit. Like, when you're a kid, like you just have no worries. Like nothing can ever harm you. You're jumping off roofs. You're doing pile drivers into tables and stuff. Like nothing bad can happen. Your speed, you don't put your seatbelt on, all this stuff. And as soon as you become an adult, or if you have a kid, or when there's people relying on you, your whole attitude just changes. And you're like, oh no, I could kick the bucket at any minute.
Yeah.
So I kind of see it as that transition to adulthood too. Obviously, it's different for Puss in Boots, but just projecting the metaphor.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I think it's such an effective way that they kind of build up the Puss character, like you said, in that first sequence, and then tear him down during. Yeah. This like quote, I keep calling it a retirement sequence.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Is, yeah.
Because he just he gets in there and he has to use a litter box.
Right.
And he tries to cook for himself and she sprays him in the face. You know, and these kind of things that it's funny because these are all anthropomorphic, right? They're all anthropomorphic creatures anyway.
Right.
So it's like it's funny that for him, this is what retirement is just becoming a regular cat.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really funny, but obviously it doesn't last.
No, of course not.
Because
he finds out about the falling star,
right,
and the ability to have one last wish, and he's going to wish for more life just so he can go live a careless life again. And so it's like, really, it's like, it's not the best wish, and so you're not.
Right.
I don't think you're really supposed to root for it in a way. But when he is in retirement, he does come across Perrito.
Right.
And I love Perrito in this, and of course he's played by
Harvey
Guillermo.
Guillen.
Guillermo from What We Do in the Shadows.
Guillermo.
And he's great in this. I love seeing him in stuff.
Yeah, and I think he really does have that really the magnetism that I think his real life form has.
Yeah.
I think Harvey Guillen. Yeah, I think he has a magnetism about him that like really makes you connect with him on screen, and I think he was able to kind of make that work through just his voice as Perrito because he brings this positivity.
Yeah,
and I think that kind of radiates through the entire movie, and obviously it goes into the whole map process, which you had explained a little bit of, and I'm sure we'll talk more about. But I think that was a great counterbalance to Puss in Boots, especially at that point, because he wasn't necessarily as happy-go-lucky as maybe he was in that opening scene because of everything that he knew up to this point and the fear that he was living with.
Yeah, exactly. He kind of falls in that trap where like when he's just going after the map and going after the star, he's good, and he forgets that death is chasing him, and then he gets those quick reminders. And one of the scenes with Puss and Perrito that I love the most is like when I think it's the second time he runs into death and he's just like literally running away, and Perrito's chasing him, and then Puss ends up having this like panic attack.
Yep.
And Perrito becomes this like service dog almost, where he just lays on top of him and calms him down. Like I think that was a big moment for Puss in the Movement. Very clearly, visually, this really charming moment. It's one of my favorite little just scenes in the movie.
Absolutely, because it kind of solidifies their relationship, which I think is a big deal, and he calls himself a therapy dog, or whatever, and it kind of proves to be that.
It almost like to me it's like the opposite of like he's not Shrek's donkey anymore, Perrito.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he's now like they are friends from here.
Yeah. Well, and I think they do a really effective job. So once the chase begins, like there's 3 distinct groups.
Right.
So you have obviously Puss in Boots, Kitty Softpaws, and Perrito are one group. Goldie and the 3 Bears are the other group, and then Jack Horner and his
Baker's
minions, Baker's Dozen, and whatever. They're the 3rd group, and I think they do a really good job of kind of almost being an ensemble. Once they get to the Dark Forest and everything, and that's where the bulk of the movie takes place. Really, is the Dark Forest, which I think that's kind of an interesting thing too, because the way that they incorporate the map and the way that the path can change makes the Dark Forest feel like such a more epic landscape than just being a dark forest. Right. So I think that's also really smart and effective because it turns the ups the stakes of the quest, if you will, because anything can change.
Right.
When it does multiple times through the
strategy,
journey.
who's looking at the map can become part of their strategy, which it does at one point.
Right, exactly. So they're first having Perrito do it, and it becomes like the smelling the flowers and all of that. It's very easy compared to everything that like Puss in Kitty Softpaws was going to have to walk through to get to the star. So I think that's that kind of stuff was really great too, because it allowed you to get it more into the deeper layers of those characters, because it's like, well, this is what's inside.
Right.
The map is revealing what's inside. So I think that's also really cool. And
that's what
for the other characters as well.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at, I guess, in the before section without spoiling too much. I guess that's what I like about the movies. You get to see them so much deeper. Like what would Toy Story be like? Toy Story would be like if you could see what Woody really, really thought. You know what I mean? And,
right.
And that's kind of forced out of Puss and in Kitty Softpaws when they hold the map, or anybody that holds the map, because it shows that. It kind of shows those deepest fears and stuff. So, and then of course it's such a great contradiction when Perrito grabs it and everything's just lovely.
Right. Yeah, and I think the inner dynamics of each group works really well. And I think you kind of got this like crime gang group with Goldie and the Three Bears, which is a fun kind of spin on the fable.
Yeah.
Where she's kind of I guess the ringleader, more or less. It seems like she is kind of centered as that, but they have their own dynamics, which is kind of shown through what her ultimate wish kind of is that she wants a regular family, which is funny because she already has one. You know, and I think that's kind of where obviously that's where the film goes ultimately, is everybody realizes they've got what they want anyway, and that's the big
look
lesson.
at what's right in front of you.
Right. And then except for Jack Horner, who's obviously just he's just
I just want world domination. Is that too much to ask?
Right. Well, I thought I had it written down where it was like, oh, you're an irredeemable monster. Where that little like, cricket character,
the little Jiminy the Cricket.
Jiminy Cricket. I wrote it down as Jiminy Cricket, even though I don't think he was a cricket. Which I thought he was a really fun addition to like the Jack Horner group.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like giving him like a little conscience, because it was effective.
That he doesn't listen to.
Right, he doesn't listen to it, but it's effective because instead of just being this like villainous group where there's no depth to it at all, no counter voice or anything like that, this little Jiminy Cricket character can kind of give that to Jack Horner, because him ignoring him says just as much about his character as him not being there at all and just doing stuff.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So I think that was actually a really, it could almost seem like a throwaway touch, but it's effective.
Super, because it almost can seem like just a comedy gag, but you're and it is funny when he ignores him and stuff. But you are learning about Jack and really how irredeemable he is. And one point I was going to make too, like you did kind of mention, like basically what Goldie and her group gets to is a lot of the same like themes that like happens with Puss in Boots, where it's like what you want is right in front of you, just look at it. But I do like it with Goldie and that group. It's more of a slow burn on what she really wants, and like it kind of like for a lot of the movie they just seem like they're just bad guys or like tertiary villains, and you kind of get those breadcrumbs of Mama Bear always talking about wanting to start something as a family, just start something as a family crime group or this or that. She so like you look back and you're like, oh, it's so clear that Mama Bear thinks of them as a whole family. Right. And when you finally learn, really that Goldie doesn't necessarily think that way, or she doesn't know if she wants bears to be her family. It's kind of just, I don't know, it just kind of feels like such a well-rounded out arc, and it doesn't feel like they're just copying Puss in Boots in their arc. They're just marrying them. They're not copying them.
Right. Well, I mean, because while obviously in the end, Puss in Boots, Kitty Softpaws, and Perrito kind of become a family, that's not necessarily that wasn't necessarily the aim. Right. You know what I mean? The aim for him was to have his 9 lives, and to appreciate the life that he has left. Right. Now, yes, that does mean he'll probably have a family because the trio will stick together. Whereas for Goldie, like the feeling like maybe she didn't necessarily belong because she's not a bear.
She's different.
Right, she's different. I think weighed heavily on that decision. Yeah. Like just the dynamics of the group. But obviously she chooses to save Baby, instead of getting the map and getting the wish. So, and that's thus, solidifying their family. So I think that, that was a great moment. Yeah. Just in a string of great moments in that final sequence on the star, that kind of led up, it's surprising how many elements are going on the star in that last final sequence. With as many characters as they have, nobody was left behind. Right. And I thought that was great.
Yeah, Jack's getting his comeuppance. The Goldilocks and the Three Bears are getting their like moment together and like becoming a family. Puss is challenging death and like, really because of Perrito, that when he gave him that line of like, I've only had one life this whole time and I've enjoyed it. Like, it hasn't bothered me that I've only had one life. Right. Like it's bothering you. And that's that, that aha moment. And then that, which then inspires Puss to fight death or to fight Wolf. Yeah. And they have a great battle. I love how that rounds out. And Kitty Softpaws is there helping. So yeah, because she's found somebody she can trust and stuff. So yeah, they're wrapping up so many things on that star. Yeah. I know. I guess that's why it's impressive to me. I think I said in the before section, like what I like about this movie is it feels like so many arcs are being completed. And I just appreciate that because you really don't expect that, I guess, in tons of animated movies.
Yeah. Well, and I think maybe one of the most interesting parts of all three groups is kind of Perrito. I think he has he interjects himself into all three.
Sure.
Obviously he's in the main group, but even that, even the Goldie tree or the Goldie group with the three bears,
Yeah.
His line of like, you've won the orphan lottery,
Right.
like that
Yeah.
comes back, because she calls back that line at the end of the movie. So it's like, Perrito's positivity, radiates there. And then when Perrito tries to do the cute face at Jack Horner, which is the kind of the cute eyes thing,
Right.
like that, and obviously it looks like he's having a hernia or something.
He did. He just caused his nose to bleed. So.
Right, exactly. But it was a really great use of Perrito as kind of, you almost want to like compare him to like Grogu in The Mandalorian, which is kind of like, I think everybody likes Grogu, I think, to a certain degree, but there's a lot of people that kind of see him as literally just like a cute thing to have on screen to either, make toys of or just whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And kind of just have that cute thing on screen that people like to look at. And I think Perrito, in some regards, could have been that.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like this just superficial furniture-esque kind of character that is just meant to, like you said, give cute eyes or whatever, and not really have much else. But he interjects himself into every character story arc in a really real way, and almost becomes a lot of the driving force of the movie.
Yeah,
really beyond Puss in Boots.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, I think the movie feels like an ensemble because of that. And I don't think that hurts the movie. It doesn't. I don't feel like you're like not getting enough of Puss in Boots. Antonio Banderas is great. He's got the great voice and inflection for
not taking
for
away
the character.
Anything. I didn't mean that.
No, I know, but it's like, I think that's what's good about a movie, when there's room for more people to shine than just, I guess, the titular hero. Titular hero. Yeah,
Don't
so
say that. You can't say that on
I know.
our
Bleep
podcast.
that out. So, but yeah. So I know. I just really love the way it wraps up. And I just think there's lots of ways you can look at the movie. It's no pun intended when I'm talking about perspective, because I think that it's Goldie's perspective that changes on her situation in life and what her family is. It's Puss's perspective on what that last life is like.
Yeah.
It's Kitty's perspective on Puss and stuff. So I really just feel like perspectives can change when you like really stare at what's right in front of you and stuff and appreciate it. And I think the movie does a great job of expressing that.
Well, yeah, I agree. I want to talk just real quick. We've talked in broad strokes a lot about the little moments here on the star, but let's focus for a second really on that last fight with Death and Puss in Boots. Like, I thought that was a really great scene because it like the fight didn't necessarily, obviously
he doesn't win or lose.
He doesn't really win or lose, right? Exactly, which I think is such an interesting thing. It's more that Death just saw something different in him,
right?
Like, and it kind of goes back to the legend thing that I mentioned earlier about kind of like stripping away this idea of legend, and that I think that's what ultimately saved Puss in Boots was like shedding that veneer of the legend. Because it was, it comes off so phony, and then it's like it's not who they really are, and it's almost like I feel like in certain regards, legends are kind of built around fear, like fear of not being seen this way.
Yeah.
So I think you could maybe say that in the beginning about Puss in Boots, like he would be afraid not to be seen the way that crowd at that house saw him.
Right.
And I feel like in that moment with Death and the wolf and on the star, that wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
Because he had changed and learned so much about who he is and what to appreciate in the people around him that, again, the wolf saw a different person, someone he didn't want to kill.
Yeah, right. Someone he didn't. Yeah. And I think they do a good job too of, when he's Puss is in that room where like he's with his other 8 lives, the lives that all have died.
Right.
And they're all that cocky version of himself that he is kind of changing away from.
Right.
And really what I love about that scene is like when he's interacting with those lives, he doesn't really like them. Like he's like, and it's him, what I mean? But he doesn't like them. And so you kind of see Wolf comes in and kind of destroys each and every one of those. And I'm kind of like, my brain's like saying like those are gone and all that remains is the Puss that we have in front of us.
Right.
And that's a good thing. But yeah, you're right. It's
very Star Wars.
Yeah.
I guess like Luke in the cave.
That's why I said like,
or Ray in the I guess her cave.
Yeah, I just love what Wolf brought to the movie. And
Yeah.
like I said, it's kind of risky, like I said, to have death be your main villain and to have your main character scared to die throughout the whole movie, to bring that into a kid's movie. But I
Right.
think they pull it off.
Well, and I think it's because it's not your standard, you know, personification, if you will, of death. I think that they're having it be this wolf-esque figure, one that people can ultimately see.
Yeah.
It's not just like a figment of his imagination or something like that, his inner psyche telling him this. I think that goes a long way. They do some of the styling the same, like the black cloak, and instead of the scythe, he's got the two like hooks and stuff like that. So, they do
cool.
little changes. Yeah. And it obviously makes for great fight sequences because it kind of gives him a little bit more, I guess, interesting flexibility with his move set,
right,
if you will, especially when he connects him into one staff and it becomes almost like a Darth Maul situation. But I think all of that kind of goes a long way as opposed to, even being like a, this is going to sound silly, but, like a Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, like version of death, or, Ingmar Bergman, playing chess with death,
right,
that kind of thing, so it's a play on that I think is effective in this kind of fantastical movie.
Yeah, I almost wish they left death where he was a figment of Puss's imagination.
Oh, really?
In a way. I
think
kind
so,
of
huh?
do.
Okay.
I kind of wish they did, but because it's not like death really interacts with anybody else anyway.
No, but to be fair, Kitty, that's how Kitty Softpaw
That's
kind
true,
of like
yeah.
was able to kind
Knew
of
he wasn't lying.
Right, knew
Yeah.
he wasn't lying about running away.
Yeah.
Which there's some of those things that can come off as like kind of like standard movie tropes. They
Sure.
see him running away. It's like, oh, he doesn't really care about us. He was just trying to steal the wish, and that kind of thing. Which I mean, it works. It's effective. It's a cliche for a reason, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like it can kind of help elevate some of that stuff and kind of settle the forced drama that comes from those situations.
But yeah, eventually, I guess death is defeated. But I do love. He's like, hey, I'll be back. He's like, yeah, I know. And it's okay.
You're right.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of a cute little thing. So, but before the movie ends, you got to get that shot of them still being a family. All right, what's it going to be like after this? And you get to see that they've stolen a boat. They're going to be at sea. They're going to go. They're still going to adventure, but it's going to be together. And I think to your point, it's not a Puss now isn't. He's not adventuring because he's trying to live up to this like hero. He's just going to be himself and have fun with the people he's with and stuff. And maybe go visit some friends.
I was going to say, and be in the next Shrek movie that's coming. Yeah, so absolutely. And there's multiple Shrek references in the movie.
Yeah.
There's Pinocchio's in there for like a quick second. Gingerbread Man's in there for a quick second. And and then Far Away, this Far Away sign.
And just the whole like Fables universe that is Shrek is obviously Jack Horner and Goldilocks, even though they might not have been in Shrek individually though. But it's that world and it feels familiar.
Yeah, and I know another Shrek is coming, so it would shock me if that trio doesn't show up in whatever the new Shrek movie is in whatever way. There was a fun like non-Shrek reference though. So when like Jack Horner is defeated at the end and he does, did you notice the Terminator 2 reference? Where he does a thumb down as he sinks instead of a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I think it's also like Jack Horner because he puts his thumb in the pie, but it's also Terminator 2 because instead of doing the opposite of the thumbs up.
It's a good catch by that animation department there.
Right? You always have a little fun with stuff, fun with stuff like that in a movie like this.
All right, Rob, I think that was a pretty great discussion on Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, a movie that I really enjoyed, but we were watching it to see if you were going to enjoy it as much as I did. So, usually we end these conversations with our big question being, Rob, did you like the movie and would you recommend it to people?
The short answer is yes.
Sweet.
Definitely. Yeah, it was... I think it was as good as I hoped it would be.
Cool.
Just from what I had heard. Again, it was never something I had avoided because I wasn't interested. It was more I didn't necessarily want to have to watch the first two to get to this one, and and I like Shrek. Like I'm not like I do have fond memories of the first one especially, and even the second one. But I didn't necessarily. I know it was like a third one,
it fell off, maybe.
and I didn't watch any of the Puss in Boots movies before this one. So, it was just something that I didn't jump in because of that. But I'm glad I did. Like you said, it didn't have to watch. Even if I didn't watch Shrek, it wouldn't have mattered. You know what I mean? Like it really didn't even need to do that, except for maybe to understand what the Far Away thing at the very end was. But I think they did a really great job of examining, appreciating your life. And like I said, the deconstruction of a legend. I think that's also a really big deal with a movie like this. I thought the Perrito character, Harvey Guillen's character, I thought was really great. Brought a lot of positivity and kind of elevated what would, like I said, kind of be a throwaway cute character into something more. Yeah, I don't think there was a wasted character in the whole movie, to be perfectly frank, which I think is a lot to say for a movie like this with so many characters in it. Yeah, I'm very glad I finally got to watch Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Well, Ray, I loved Puss in Boots.
Great.
Which was not shocking to me, but again, it's always nice to enjoy your recommendation. But before we go, we got to know: is there anything else you want to recommend to me and the audience?
Yeah. I think I'll definitely take the opportunity to do that. One thing I watched on Netflix it's called Your Monster.
Okay.
It's from 2024. Has Melissa Barrera,
Oh,
who I
do
really
like her.
liked from In the Heights and Scream series now.
Yep.
And then Tommy Dewey, who he's really unrecognizable. He plays the monster, it's kind of like Drop Dead Fred,
Oh,
but with
interesting.
an adult dark comedy version of like a Drop Dead Fred, but the monster's like that monster in your closet kind of thing. Visually, he kind of reminded me of like that. Remember like the late 80s or early 90s Beauty and the Beast TV show?
Yeah.
Ron Perlman kind of like had that
Absolutely.
visuals
Okay.
kind of to it. So it was pretty cool. It's kind of, dealing with these themes, the monster in your closet, the monster inside you kind of thing. And
Sure.
Tommy Dewey's kind of really great as the monster. He's not like, he kind of plays it like a normal average Joe who just looks like a monster, like how a monster would act. And so it's pretty cool. It's kind of a, it's a dramedy, it's dark comedy. They kind of bounce the line pretty well. The ending, like, it's fine, I think. Don't know if it actually hits a home run there and stuff, but it's not bad. It's worth a check out.
Okay.
And then the other thing I watched this week was the movie Nuremberg.
Okay.
Has Russell Crowe and Rami Malek in it.
Yep.
It's kind of going over like the Nazi trials of Hermann Goring.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty solid too. Rami Malek plays the psychiatrist that was kind of working with all those top head of the Nazi regime. His job was basically to kind of do these psychoanalysis, make sure they weren't going to commit suicide before their day in court, and before they could punish them themselves. And then this kind of like you could see the psychology of Hermann Goring, who was pretty sure he was going to beat the charges, and kind of the stuff they did to prevent that and stuff.
Sure.
So that was probably worth a good watch, especially if you want a 1940 a World War II movie. It's not just about fighting and stuff. That wasn't a bad one. So totally recommend those two. What about you? What you been watching, Rob?
Let's see. I actually have a few things. I watched a movie called Dead of Winter.
Okay.
Which stars Emma Thompson, who's a treasure.
Of course she is.
And Judy Greer. And Emma Thompson plays a widow who her husband recently died. She lives in like northern Minnesota, so kind of like out in the boonies, and it's like frozen, like again, dead of winter. And she's supposed to go and kind of and bury his ashes like in a lake from when they were young. And when she kind of goes up to that area where the lake is, she ends up discovering that there is like a small cabin nearby, and there is a weird guy outside, and she realizes something's wrong, and realizes that they have somebody like a young girl kidnapped in their basement. And Judy Greer is part of the whole plot as well, and it's funny because it's almost kind of like a Midwestern version of like Taken. Sure. Like Liam Neeson, that's kind of like what she becomes. Not that she has any kind of like special training or anything like that, but she has to like save the day. It's pretty good. Like again, Emma Thompson's. It's not a role you typically see her in.
No, she's not an action hero.
Right. So I think that was kind of what made the movie really interesting. But the funny thing is, I think it was filmed in like Northern Europe.
Oh, really?
But it's supposed to be Minnesota.
Okay.
So it kind of has a bit of like a Swedish vibe to the whole thing, because I think the director may be I don't know.
Tax breaks.
Right, exactly. But anyway, so I watched that, and then I also watched the Wrecking Crew.
Oh yeah.
With Batista and Jason Momoa. That was fun. Like it is in no way groundbreaking. It is in no way surprising. Like as far as like the plot goes,
Yeah.
it's so predictable. It's almost
by the
silly at
numbers.
times.
Yeah.
But the thing that sells it are the action pieces are actually pretty decent. The setting, it takes place in Hawaii, so it's kind of got a nice vibe with that. And the chemistry between Batista and Momoa like just sings. Like it's really great.
It's got to be a fun movie because when I think of those two, I'm like, one of those guys can act and one can't, and it might not be the one you think.
Well, and the funny thing is I think they're both really good in this movie because they're both kind of doing what they do best.
Yeah,
where like
I mean, it's got to be fun.
Yeah, where Momoa's like kind of over the top and kind of weird, and kind of like that kind of gruff kind of character, whereas Batista's kind of this button-up military guy who it's almost like the seriousness of like something you might have seen with his character in Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it was like he's very serious and like very stoic, but he also is he does have his kind of goofy moments, which kind of gives that Guardians vibe a little bit, from time to time. But so it's a fun watch. You probably will never watch it more than once,
right?
But you're not going to regret watching it, despite it being so damn predictable.
Okay.
The other thing that I watched that I've been wanting to watch for a while and finally got around to watching was the Toxic Avenger, the new remake of Toxic Avenger with Peter Dinklage. It was a lot of fun. Like I do enjoy Troma movies, like, and I know like the thing with Troma is like they're very much like it's a cult following. Either love Troma or you hate Troma, and I think
I'm still dealing with my own personal trauma.
There, I mean, we all are in our own way, and but I think this did a pretty good job of kind of like elevating Troma a little bit. It still has like a lot of the gore and a lot of the goof, and all of that kind of stuff. And Dinklage does a really great job as like the main character. Kevin Bacon is a really good villain. Elijah Wood is in it. It's kind of like a creepy kind of sidekick kind of guy for the villain. Jacob Tremblay, who it's funny, Mr. Kitty Kaiju used to love If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, the books and the show. And the kid who voices the mouse's kid is in this movie. So it's weird when you're kind of like, you're like hearing the voice and you're like, oh, like you're not supposed to be in this movie. This is an adult movie. But another thing that was interesting about the Toxic Avenger is apparently they used because you had a hard time getting a release.
Yeah, I thought it was like canceled at one point.
Right, and then it ended up being picked back up. And I guess somehow through the release, they were able to take some of the proceeds or something and then pay off medical debt. Like people's medical debt with it. And I'm not exactly sure how they did that. I need to look more into that, but I know that was like one of their big things. So that's kind of what the movie's about.
Oh, I see.
Is like, a guy who ends up getting, who's sick and he can't afford care. His insurance doesn't work for him and all of that. And the guy that he works for, the company he works for, which is obviously Kevin Bacon, screw him over and he ends up becoming the Toxic Avenger. And like, so it's that kind of thing. But so I guess that's a little bit of like the underlying theme of the movie.
Yeah, it's cool to throw that money back.
Right, exactly. Do something good with it for once. Let's see. And then I watched 2 series real quick. I watched the 3rd season of School Spirits, which I know I've talked about on here before. It's a show that I think has kind of run out of runway. Like they're kind of getting to a point now where they, I feel like they're just finding ways to keep it going. And they've gotten themselves now into a situation where they have a device, like a narrative device that is it worked once, but now it's kind of cheap. It's almost like it's almost akin to masks in Mission Impossible, where it's like everybody's got a mask now and like whatever. So there's an element to the story that they've introduced that kind of it's like it can go infinitum at this point if they wanted it to, and it just like they really need to let it go. But Peyton List is still great. Like I
saw a quote from her this week talking about season 4. Like I don't know, maybe saying like it's going somewhere she really didn't expect or something.
And
like that.
maybe
that could be good.
And it could be good. And my hope is that maybe the next season might be the last season. Like, and that's the thing. If they can wrap it up well, I think it would work. It would work well. They added Jennifer Tilly this season, so going back to Bound. How much we love Bound here at RayRob, but like Jennifer Tilly is great, and I think she did a great job in this show for what she was. And then the next thing we watched, and this one is a recommend for you because it's going to recommend something else, and I know you're going to get tired of me saying this. So how
I'm
to
tired of you saying this.
you're going to be because I watched the first season of How to Get to Heaven from Belfast,
Right.
which is the from the same creator as Dairy Girls, which you need to everybody needs to watch Dairy Girls. Like I can't stress
And
this
you have
enough.
you have stressed this. You're right. I'm gonna do it.
You got to do it. But How to Get to Heaven from Belfast is a completely different kind of show. It's
Yeah.
more of like a murder mystery type thing, but it's got some pretty interesting elements to it. I thought it wrapped up pretty well. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a multi-season series, but the way they ended it, it's going to be a multi-season series. And I wasn't sure if they could pull that off by the end, to be frank. But I think they did it enough that I'm interested to see what they do in a second season, because it's really kind of like centered on the three main characters, which I think is the most important part of the show.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's a fun show. It's especially if you enjoy that kind of like landscape of Northern Ireland and stuff like that, and just the quirkiness of it, and they handle that really well. And if you watch Dairy Girls, you would know what to be expecting. But both are definitely worth your time.
All right, Rob. Well, I think we can safely end this episode on Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. But I have a last wish.
Yeah, you do.
And that is some low-hanging fruit for the puns I usually try to put in this segment, but I don't care. My last wish to everybody listening would be to like the podcast if you haven't done so yet. Subscribe to the podcast. Review the podcast. If you leave us a 5-star review, we're going to read it live on air someday. Don't forget, you guys can reach out to me and Rob and via email if you email us at carrayrob@gmail.com. And you guys can also talk to us on Blue Sky at carrayrob.
Absolutely. You can now find us on both Instagram and Facebook as well. Make sure to go over there and give us a like and see all the fun stuff we're doing over there. If there's a comment section on whatever platform you are on, by all means, let us know what you thought of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. You know what? I want to know what your favorite animated movie is. Whatever, any era,
tough.
any type, anything. I want to know what it is. We would love to see that. We will be back next week with this month's episode of Hello Movies, My Old Friend, where Ray and I are going to be revisiting the Australian comedy Young Einstein.
We sure are.
Written, directed, starring, produced by
Citizen
Yahoo Serious. Right,
Citizen
Yahoo
Kane.
Serious. Yahoo Serious' Citizen Kane, exactly. And then we were going to be back in 2 weeks with our very special episode for March, because there are 5
That's
Mondays
right.
in March. We are going to be doing a kids edition episode of Say Hello to My Little Film. Mr. Kitty Kaiju will be back in studio, and we are going to be showing him one of our absolute favorite movies, the 1987 sci-fi parody comedy Spaceballs.
The Mel Brooks masterpiece.
It is. It's a Mel Brooks masterpiece, and I am very excited to see what Mr. Kitty Kaiju thinks of that movie. But then the week after that, we will be back with our first episode of April of Say Hello to My Little Film, and it will be back to me, and I've got something I'm very excited to show Ray. I think everybody's really going to enjoy
Cool.
it. I hope he will, though.
Me
It's
too.
gonna be
I
a
hope
little
he's
bit
gonna
of-
like
It's going
it.
to be a little bit of a challenge, though.
Oh boy. Well, you thought you were challenging me before.
I
and
did. That's why I had to
I
come back.
passed.
That's why I have to come back. Maybe I'm going to hit you harder.
Okay.
We're going to have to see. But you are not going to want to miss it. But until then, this is RayRob.
Where I'm Ray.
And I'm Rob. And remember, be defined by the films you love, not the ones you hate.
Hey there, it'll be just a little while till Ray and Rob spit their spittle. Come on, check out of the hospital. So grab some of your best peanut brittle. This will be a darn good transmittal. And say hello to my little film.
All right, everyone, before we go, I gotta give you a sneak peek of what my first episode in April of Say Hello to My Little Film is going to be. And I'm excited to show Ray this movie. I've been trying to challenge him a little bit, and I think I'm going to be doing that again with this movie. And that is the 1989 British black comedy How to Get Ahead in Advertising, directed by Bruce Robinson, and it stars Richard E. Grant, who I really love. Like, he just has a presence about him that is undeniable, and he's just kind of a crazy guy, and this movie is no exception. He plays an ad exec who has a bit of a nervous breakdown, just kind of over the concerns of the ethics of his profession, and he something I'm just going to say pops up for him, and kind of sends his whole world spiraling and kind of questioning who he is and what he's doing and why he's doing it, and his personality in general. But it's a great movie, and I think it might push Ray though, because there's a little bit of a body horror element to it that he may not necessarily be into, but you will. I can almost guarantee it. I know I am. So you should definitely check out How to Get Ahead in Advertising, and we will see you then.